If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. We are going over a requested case from one of our patrons today. The murder of Cathy Cesnik of The Keepers, which has been blowing the mainstream narrative of so-called satanic abuse wide open. Now, some believe that this wasn't specifically satanic and it was just generic sex abuse, etc. Not that there could be ever such not to downplay the vile nature of the crime, but simply that there was no satanic angle to it. Obviously, if you haven't checked out the MINDSHOCK podcasts on satanic panic and expose throughout the past few decades, definitively proving that many people have been prosecuted and tons of videos have been found of satanic ritual abuse. And satanic panic is not simply a myth like the mainstream media on the Idiot Box has spewed forth so much propaganda over the decades, attempting to downplay or dismiss all of these legitimate victims, and it is very tragic that so many gullible goofs fall for the narrative on the Idiot Box. And it's just simply a bridge too far for them that the most vile scum in the world, they would do all these crimes against children, but for whatever reason, they would never videotape it or sell the videotapes. I mean, it's a weird thing. Coincidence theorist brains, I mean, obviously they're not logical, but it's just really weird how they work, because even the most devout, clueless goof coincidence theorist, they clearly believe that there's humans out there committing crimes against children, really the worst kind of crimes imaginable. But for whatever reason, I guess because the Idiot Box told them that nobody actually films and sells videos of the crimes, they have to pretend and hallucinate that that's an impossibility, even though we're dealing with the most bottom of the barrel filth of the human species. Somehow they would magically never do that, really? But anyway, as always, with typical MINDSHOCK fashion, we will examine the murder of Cathy Cesnik and attempt to resolve all of the anomalies. In this case, it is still an unsolved murder, and obviously all victims of all crimes deserve justice, and justice delayed is justice denied. If you want to help support the MINDSHOCK podcast, help logic and reason move forward in a world where it is quickly going extinct, and keep up awareness in all of these cold cases, unsolved cases, missing persons cases, wrongful convictions, and more, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description, or become a patron. Support the channel. That way, patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're not getting notifications, just like and comment on more videos. That's how the YouTube algorithm works. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Help support the channel that way. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So, let's start with the basics of the case. We'll go from the wiki. Cathy Anne Cesnik, born November 17th, 1942, disappeared November 7th, 1969, was an American Catholic religious sister who taught English and drama at Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, Maryland. November 7th, 1969, Cesnik disappeared. Her body was discovered on January 3rd, 1970, near a garbage dump in the Baltimore suburb of Lansdowne. Her unsolved murder served as the basis for the Netflix documentary series The Keepers in 2017. And of course, I went over the Keepers cult and all of the videotapes seized in that case, and all of the funny business with the FBI. So you can check out those podcasts on that, Satanic Cults and Satanic Panic. Biography: Cathy Anne Cesnik was born November 17th, 1949, Lawrenceville neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She was the eldest child of Joseph and Anna Cesnik. Her paternal grandparents, John and Joanna Tomek Cesnik were Slovenians who emigrated from Yugoslavia, while her maternal grandfather, Joseph Omulak, came from Yugoslavia and maternal grandmother, Martha Hudok, came from Austria. Cesnik had 3 siblings. Cesnik attended St. Mary's School on 57th Street and St. Augustine High School, both in Lawrenceville. She was valedictorian at the graduation of her high school class in 1960 after being the May Queen and the president of the senior class and student council, so quite accomplished in her high school career. Now, for those that don't know about May Queens, I mean, this isn't really, I guess in America it's not as common, but in the British Isles and parts of the Commonwealth, the May Queen or Queen of May is the personification of the May Day holiday and of springtime and also summer. The May Queen is a girl who rides or walks at the front of the parade for May Day celebrations. She wears a white gown to symbolize purity and usually a tiara or crown. Her duty is to begin the May Day celebrations. She is generally crowned by flowers and makes a speech before the dancing begins. Certain age groups dance around a maypole celebrating youth and springtime. She joined the School Sisters of Notre Dame when she was 18, which is a Roman Catholic institution. Disappearance and death. In the fall of '69, Cesnik was teaching drama and English at the Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, Maryland, a private Catholic school for girls opened in 1965. On November 7th, '69, she left the apartment she shared with Helen Russell Phillips at the Carriage House Apartments at 131 North Bend Road in Catonsville, en route to the Edmondson Village Shopping Center to purchase a gift for her sister's engagement at Hecht's Jewelry Store. She cashed a paycheck at First National Bank in Catonsville that night. She may have made a purchase at Mooley's Bakery in Edmondson's Village, since a box of buns from that bakery was found in the front seat of her car. At 4:40 a.m. the next morning, Russell's friends Peter McCohen and Gerard J. Koob, both Catholic priests, found Cesnik's car in muddy condition and illegally parked across from her apartment complex. Residents at the apartment complex noticed Cesnik in her car at approximately 8:30 that night. Others spotted her illegally parked across the street 2 hours later. Already, this timeline is it's looking pretty sketchy. Residents at the apartment complex noticed her in the car at 8:30 p.m. Not even that late, I guess. Others spotted her car illegally parked across the street 2 hours later. So when she was in her car at 8:30, was that everything seemed fine? So she was leaving somewhere, or had she already returned? Search and discovery of body. Immediately after Cesnik's disappearance, police searched the area of her body without success. Area for her body without success. On January 3rd, 1970, her body was found by a hunter and his son in Formal landfill located on the 2100 block of Monumental Road in a remote area of Lansdowne. Background: Teresa Lancaster and Jean Wenner, former students at Keough, said that they were sexually abused by Keough's chaplain, the Catholic priest Joseph Maskell. The first public allegations against Maskell was connected to the murder were made in 94. In 95, they filed a lawsuit against Maskell, the school gynecologist Christian Richter. A lawsuit against Maskell, the school gynecologist Christian Richter, not the school gynecologist. That was phrased kind of weird. Why would a school have a specific I don't know. The School Sisters of Notre Dame, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and Cardinal William H. Keeler. The trial court dismissed the action as time barred by the statute of limitations. The plaintiffs appealed. A writ of certiorari was granted by the Maryland Court of Appeals, which upheld the lower court's decision, ruling in part, quote, that the mental process of repression of memories of past sexual abuse does not activate the discovery rule. The plaintiff's suits are thus barred by the statute of limitation, end quote. Okay, I'm going to have to interject here because historical context is very important. So all of these clueless coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists who think that there would never be these vast conspiracies and institutions, I mean, let's look at this through a historical lens as well. Back in the 70s, who would believe that these upstanding members of the church, possibly connected with politicians and such, would ever do all of these horrible things? And now you have these same clueless goofs saying the same thing about politicians. Now, post-Epstein, the clueless goofery of authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists has been exposed to a certain degree. Because now, post-Epstein Maxwell, with all of these scumbag politicians and billionaires of various companies, now that it all has been kind of blown wide open, the clueless goofery of authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists throughout the past few decades can be clearly exposed. And it's actually a sad thing, because part of the reason a lot of victims haven't come forward in the past, and even now, against supposedly high-ranking people in churches or institutions, is because of this perception of the response to it. Because they know such a large percentage of the population are just these clueless authority-worshipping cultists with just zero brain power that would look down on them and think that they're lying. Now, again, obviously, let's not fall for forced dichotomies, a certain percentage, I would say the minority, but I don't know. Even if it's 50-50 or close to 50-50, that doesn't excuse the real victims not getting justice just because all of these other people are making stuff up. Which obviously, if that's definitively proven, that, you know, the punishment should be what they're accusing innocent people of. And again, it can get a little dicey, because there was actually an episode, was this an episode of the show Lie to Me? Does anybody remember the show Lie to Me? I'm not sure if it was this show or a different show. In the military, there was some guy there was a high-ranking officer abusing female soldiers underneath him. And a soldier who hadn't been abused, she made up the story that she was, because the true victims were too scared to come forward. So she lied, but the accuser really was guilty, just not of the crime to her. So that's in the gray area, because the accuser should still be held accountable. Regardless, I mean, see, the weird thing is like, under common law, if there is no injured party, there is no crime. So obviously all of this extortion, I don't want to get too off topic with police officers extorting peaceful citizens, driving without hurting anybody just because of whatever so-called violations. If there is no injured party, there is no crime. Now, if there is an injured party, but they do not want to press charges, what does that mean? That's tough. That can get dicey. Now, in the case of a minor, it shouldn't matter whether they want to press charges or not, because the crime is the crime. Committing crimes against minors, obviously, is unconscionable. Now, in the case of adults, particularly in certain crimes, some of these are retaliatory crimes. Now, they might not be proportional. So if one party wrongs somebody and then the other party wants vengeance and it's some kind of assault, sexual or otherwise, yeah, that's all a dicey gray area. But let's focus on the area where the victims truly are innocent and they didn't do anything to the person that attacked them. Justice should be served even if they don't want to press charges, right? I mean, that's a dicey situation, because it's not even just about the victim anymore, because the perpetrator is out and about and free to make other victims. So even if the victim doesn't want to press charges, is there some kind of bearing of responsibility to hold the guilty accountable, even if the victim doesn't want them held accountable? For whatever reason, scared or whatever, psychological issues. It doesn't matter, because you need to prevent that perpetrator from gaining new victims. And in certain crimes, serial killers and otherwise, they're not going to stop. So, or even serial rapists, they're not going to stop. So does it really matter that the victim doesn't want to press charges? There's a little bit of a gray area, but there's, again, if you're talking about police who they took an oath to protect and serve the public and ensure the safety of the public, obviously a large percentage of that of police do not go by that, and they actually assault the public. But to all the good police officers out there, there's a certain responsibility there, moral at least, if not legal. Yeah, so it's really tough. I just wanted to touch on that, because in post-Epstein-Maxwell era, it seems like even the most gullible coincidence theorists might not be so quick to dismiss claims such as these. But I think there's a certain context within statutes of limitations where if there's something keeping the victims from coming forward, that does need to be addressed. But continuing on here, Wenner said that Cesnik once came to her and asked, "Are the priests hurting you?" Both women have said that she was the only member of the school's staff who helped them, and other girls being abused by Maskell. And they believe she was murdered prior to discussing the matter with the Archdiocese of Baltimore. The Baltimore Sun reported in late 2016 that since 2011, the Archdiocese has paid out settlements to Maskell's alleged victims. Okay, we're opening a real can of worms here, because now I do want to go after. I think that all of the people, both priests and nuns and whoever, that don't take these victims seriously, because apparently Catherine was the only one who helped them. So everyone else is looking the other way now, probably because they're afraid. They don't want to stick their nose in anything, whatever. But is that an excuse? I mean, they're held accountable, particularly in religious institutions. Their accountability is to God above all else, in their own mind anyway, if they're being logically consistent within their own mind. They have to hold themselves accountable to God before anybody else, before any man, before any mere mortal, corrupt or otherwise. So I don't know, like, it's kind of hard to give anybody a pass who knew about this going on, is it not? So Catherine was the only one brave enough to actually offer some kind of help. Now, you know what's really sad, though? Because if this kind of abuse goes up the totem pole, so she wanted to discuss the matter all the way up the totem pole, if those people are also corrupt and guilty and they weren't going to help her, I mean, that's sad, too, because she obviously had a certain amount of faith, you would think, in the institution. Otherwise, why would she be in it? I mean, I don't know. But, yeah, this is really sad across multiple levels here. Wenner further alleges that 2 months before Cesnik's body was discovered, and only a day or two after Cesnik disappeared on November 1969, Maskell drove her to a wooded site near Fort Meade and showed her the body. Wenner says she remembers trying repeatedly to brush off the maggots crawling on Cesnik's face while frantically repeating the words, "Help me, help me." Her account was brought into question by scientific evidence showing that it would have been impossible for maggots to be alive at that time of year. Well, what's the margin of error on that, too? Because, I mean, if it's completely outside the margin of error, because, there's all types of bugs and insects that you could find bees buzzing around in the winter here and there. Like, it's not, what's the margin of error there? However, Spitz, who worked on the case, later confirmed that there had been maggots in both the victim's mouth and trachea when found. Meteorological records also reveal that temperatures during the week in question were warm enough for maggots to hatch. The Huffington Post reported that Maskell told Wenner, "You see what happens when you say bad things about people." I mean, this is dark stuff. Now, what I don't understand here, though, is Maskell is this confident that he's showing other people the body and that they won't talk. It's a little weird. Several days later, November 13th, 1969, the body of Joyce Malecki, a 20-year-old woman who looked like Wenner, was discovered by two hunters in the same wooded location where Maskell had driven Wenner. Cesnik's body was not found until January 3rd, 1970, and its discovery by two hunters was not in the wooded location near Fort Meade, but on the open hill trash dump of a small business property in Lansdowne. In 2016, the Baltimore County Police Department reassigned the case, prompting new interviews and further investigations into the alleged sexual abuse at Keough. After obtaining permission from the state attorney's office, the BCOPD exhumed the body of Maskell, who died of a major stroke in 2001, but did not find a DNA match to evidence from the crime scene. Police spokeswoman Elise Armacost announced that this discovery does not exclude Maskell from being a suspect in the case. And if there's multiple people working together here. In 2015, HuffPost, and in 2017, CBS Baltimore repeated the three women's allegations that during Cesnik's tenure at Archbishop Keough High School, two priests at the school, Maskell and E. Neil Magnus, what a name, were sexually abusing the girls at the school in addition to trafficking them to others. In 2023, investigation of similar crimes in Baltimore area has shed new light on this case. Cesnik's death and the surrounding controversy have been the subject of academic study, including the book The Horror of Police. So let's look at some counterpoints here. On the Keepers subreddit, Not a lot of activity now, but there is a post here by Asking Gone. The thought I came away with, which I don't think was mentioned in the documentary, the second victim was killed to spell out a message. There were just 2 random killings by a random woman killer who passed through town. It has nothing to do with Cathy Cesnik's profession or what she was planning to tell to whom. There is no connection with any priest or any child abuse or anything, no connection at all. In other words, a misdirect. Maybe someone did say it, but it would have been the first thing that came to my mind anyway. Plus, another serious crime right after the first one might have put a strain on police resources. Maskell was a highly trained psychologist. Some responses here. Yeah, I feel like they were trying to make it seem like there was a killer on the loose, but what actually happened is clear as day. I thought the same thing. It connected the second murder was to throw police and public speculation off about the motives behind the first, the murder of Sister Cathy. Only an intelligent killer would have thought to do something like that. And again, I don't want to fall for false dichotomies. I mean, this is Baltimore. It's not exactly the most peaceful area in the United States. So is it possible that there was is it possible? I mean, is it even possible that Maskell would have killed her, but he actually didn't? Someone else did? But then if we believe the story about him showing the body, I mean, how is he not involved? Even if he didn't kill her directly, he would have been working with at least one person who did. So to rectify that, yeah, that's tough. That's tough. But as for the second victim, is it possible that was unrelated? Yes, I guess it is. Frankie Hellis poses a counter-argument here. It's relatively apparent the murder of Cathy had nothing to do with Maskell. Many of the claims of the participants and the keepers have been disproven. Surely abuse happened, but it had nothing to do with Cathy, as she likely wasn't even aware of it. So, this individual is presupposing and or hallucinating unless he knew her, or she knew her. Frankie Hellis, I think this is a female. If she knew Cathy, I mean, how would she know whether Cathy likely knew about it or not? So if there is abuse and it is linked to Maskell, why would there not be a link between Maskell and her murder? That's kind of a weird statement. But another follow-up poster, which claims have been disproven? I know not all of them can be true at once, but was the woman who said she told Cathy about the abuse and was taken to her body by Maskell disproven? Or the girl that was in her apartment talking to her about the abuse? I'm genuinely curious because all I heard since the documentary came out is more people coming forward initially. Frankie responded, Cathy asked for a reprieve to work in the private sector. It was denied. She and Russell did it anyway. They left Keough. Knowing what we know about Cathy, does that sound rational? In the middle of helping girls being abused, she's going to leave them? Well, that depends. How much did she find out and how scared was she for herself and the other girls? I mean, we don't have that information. Knowing what we know about Cathy, she would not have left those girls in harm's way. She would not have kept quiet. She would have gone to the parents of those girls. That is a huge responsibility and a ton of weight on one person's shoulder for anyone to carry. How could she not worry about those young ladies being sexually abused and not reach out to Jane Doe at all? Here's another fact. In the show, it is stated that in 1967, Maskell was moved from St. Clement's to Keough, where he remained until 1975. In reality, he worked part-time at Keough only, but not until 1968. He was a part-time chaplain there until 1970, at which time he was changed to a full-time status. The show got quite a bit wrong, actually. I mean, is that really relevant, though? I mean, in 67 he was moved there, but he wasn't moved there until 68. Okay, so it's slightly off. All the bones of dead people were supposedly going to be found at Keough. Nothing has ever been found. The card, well, again, there's plenty of cases where nothing is found until many, many, many decades later. Or never. That doesn't mean crimes didn't occur. The card Maskell personally sent to Joyce Malecki, it was a pre-printed card sent to all families of deceased parishioners. This sounds like he could have done that on purpose for plausible deniability to fool the gullible. Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue, but if it's true, these supposed points debunking it, this is exactly what an intelligent person would have done to cover it up. Or to include a certain amount of plausible deniability. The photo of Cathy's car with detectives standing around it, not a real photo as the car was located elsewhere. Okay, so if that's true, that's a reenactment photo. So what? A lot of shows do reenact. What? Sister, this poster is weird. Sister Florida telling Maskell to pack his bags and get out didn't happen, couldn't have happened. Well, again, nothing. How would we know about that? There really is so very much. You know how reality TV isn't really real? This whole show was reality TV. It was a good story, but Cathy's murder had zero to do with Catholic abuse. It was likely a random act of violence. I will write a more detailed post later when I have time to compile what has been disproven in a sensible manner. Okay, so here's the full list. So, is this somebody, like, is this somebody connected to all this? I mean, that's the conspiracy theory. Is this some kind of shill trying to disprove any connection? Magnus did not work at Keough in September 67 nor September 68. He started September 69. Maskell only, well, how would anybody, I don't know, like, how is that verified? Because even if that officially didn't start, does that mean he wasn't there prior, especially if he's going from part-time to full-time and all over the place? Would anybody know if he was never there for any reason? Like, if he was there in an unofficial capacity to a certain extent to help out, how would anybody know that exactly? Because even if the paperwork doesn't match up, I mean, there's lots of instances where somebody gets sent somewhere to help out and they're not officially there until a later time. Maskell only worked part-time at Keough until September 1970 when he went full-time as co-director of religious services. Maskell did not hold any power as it was claimed on the show at Keough High School. He was a chaplain for a few years and he only worked there part-time. Sister Florida did not have the power to fire Maskell as was assumed. The hiring and firing of faculty staff was an archdiocesan decision, not an SSND decision. They were hired to work there by the AOB. Maskell was not removed from St. Clement's in 67, as Franz claimed. He was there till 68 and came back to co-pastor in 1970 and also lived at the rectory at St. Clement's while working full-time at Keough. Anonymous is completely wrong about Maskell and Magnus coming to Cathy's apartment the night before she went missing. Maskell, as previously explained, only worked part-time at Keough. He had the day off on Thursdays and spent the day with his mother, taking her to do the shopping. She didn't drive. On Thursday evenings, he and his family always went out to dinner at their favorite restaurant. That Thursday was special because it was his brother-in-law's birthday week. We know that Anonymous told the story back in 2013, but never mentioned Magnus in her story back then. As for the rumor from the keepers that she did keep a police report, that is also not true. There are no police records showing that she went to the police or that anyone went to the police about anything. Unless, of course, those were removed, because if there is a conspiracy, obviously back then, where everything's mostly by papers and copies of papers, it'd be relatively easy to remove files. Now, if she did keep a file, I mean, has she presented it? Is she keeping it somewhere safe because she's afraid of it? Again, none of this really proves anything. It's weird how, again, coincidence theorists think that this is all clear debunkings when they could actually support the conspiracy theory stronger. Again, we don't know. I'm not saying they do, but if it's true, then yes. And what time was it alleged that they went the night before? Because if there are witnesses who saw Maskell dining with his family, etc., like how late would they have been out? And how late is the alleged visit purported to have occurred? Without knowing those exact details, like how would you say that didn't happen? We also found out that Magnus wanted out of Keough and resigned his position at Keough, leaving in June of 72. What does that have to do with anything? If he's committing all these crimes, I mean, why would he want to stay there and increase his chance of getting caught? No one has been yet able to prove Cathy knew about any abuse happening at Keough. Cathy left Keough to pursue a whole different life. She was also in love with Keough and having a sexual relationship. Cathy never even contacted Jean to see if she was okay. Does that sound like a woman that cared for the victims if she knew about the abuse? No, it doesn't, and how irresponsible of Cathy not to go to the students' parents. Do we know for sure she didn't go to the parents, though? So two things. If she wasn't 100% sure the abuse was going on, I mean, I don't know. How would somebody react back then? So if she knew it was a possibility, but she wasn't 100% sure, would she tell the parents? Or did she tell the parents and the parents didn't believe, and therefore they would never admit that she went to them after they found out it was true? So a lot of variables here. By June 1st, Cathy had written to Mother Superior that they would be living at the carriage house starting August 15th. That letter was dated June 1st. Last day of school was June 12th. In the letter, there was no talk about an experiment. The keeper people say it was an experiment and that they changed it to Cathy was going to the police. Which is it, the police are an experiment, or is it now both? Well, again, inconsistencies don't necessarily disprove anything, especially if there's a vast conspiracy in play. We know that Cathy and Russell did have a non-published number as the Keepers put out in their official group. Okay. We know that Mr. Noon lived with 3 other roommates, and the home that they showed on the show was not the right house. No big deal, but if they got that simple thing wrong, then what are the things that they get wrong? I mean, that's a good point, but I mean, shows get a lot of stuff wrong. It doesn't mean anything one way or the other. There was no car parked across from the carriage house on Lantern Court as we had uncovered. The car was found on Carriage Court up the block from the carriage house. The woman who saw the Keepers said they saw Cathy in the car while she was bringing in groceries. Never said she saw Cathy in the car. She said she saw what she thought was her car in the parking space, but saw no one in the car. Okay, that's interesting. Billy Schmidt was married on December 28, 68 to Virginia Sturm before Cathy left the SSND. We don't know if he was ever living in the carriage house. He was probably living with his parents and his new wife and stepson, or they were living in Virginia. Her parents and sisters moved there in January 1970. Billy and Virginia did buy a home close to his brother Bobby in 75. His brother Ronnie married Barbara in April 61, and their daughter Sharon was born in December 61. By the way, the other brother also married a Barbara. I mean, wasn't Barbara a really popular name back then? Edgar was never seen hanging out at Rock Glen Junior High in 69. It was October 71 when Cathy was already gone. But the show, people wanted you to believe it was around 69. That did not happen. Edgar's DNA was tested and there was no match in Cathy's death. And again, I go over this all the time, the limitations in DNA testing. Because, again, both in match... I mean, obviously exclusions are a little bit more accurate, but still, this is not some infallible testing, particularly in degraded samples. I mean, look at all the people being freed from the Innocence Project and otherwise exonerated after the previous several generations ago DNA matched. Now with the new technology, clearly the DNA does not match. So all these gullible goofs putting their blind faith in DNA testing and fallible human technology, pretending and hallucinating that, yeah, technology might not have been accurate decades ago, but it's definitely bulletproof now. Even though every new generation of technology is even more accurate, so disproving the previous generations. Not all the time, but sometimes. So either way, it's not 100% by any stretch of the imagination. Zimmerman was a planted story. 2 women took the bait of the planted story and went with it and wrote about it in their non-best-selling books. A 3rd woman spoke about it in a podcast. Scannell and Zimmerman were county officers, not city officers. Keough was in the city limits. Franz said Maskell was gone May 67 after his mother told the AOB about a sickly priest. Well, we know for a fact that is total BS, as he was at St. Clement's until May 68, back again in 1970. Franz's family lived right by St. Clement's. We think they would have noticed he was back, especially since he was co-pastoring. Franz's dead wife and Debbie, the niece of the big bad Edgar, are cousins. Franz was also a neighbor of the red, gray-haired super sleuth who drew the pictures. Wonder where they concocted that hotel? You may be asking, how do they know that? You have no idea how many friends of the Keepers reached out to us and told us things. So here's the thing, though. If they are planting and manufacturing certain evidence and testimony, are they doing that to get the guilt, to create more evidence of the guilty? Kind of how certain corrupt cops, they manufacture and plant evidence against suspects that they know are guilty for a fact. Obviously, some corrupt cops do this for suspects that they know are innocent, or that they don't care whether they're innocent or guilty, or maybe they think they're guilty, but they're not 100% sure. But in certain cases, when they're 100% sure, let's say there was some kind of rights violation or improper evidence collection, so it's not admissible, but it 100% irrefutably proves that a certain party is guilty. Certain cops, I mean, they will plant evidence, they'll pay for testimonies, etc., just to get the right guy. Are they wrong in doing that? I really can't say in those unique situations. Obviously, that's not a majority of situations, but in those unique situations, is that what's going on here with conspiracies this vast? I mean, are certain people kind of fighting back against corruption with their own manufacturing of stories and their own corruption? And are they wrong to do so if that is the only way they think they can get justice? I don't know. I'm just posing the questions here. This is MINDSHOCK. I do not claim anything is true or untrue. The card from St. Clement's to the Malecki family with Maskell's name on it is a standard card given to all families at Christmas time to parishioners who have lost a family member. All the pastors' names are on the cards. Jean said she was taken to a barren area where there was a bit of dirt and some grass where she was shown Cathy's dead body. Yet in her book, she wrote that the body was right by the Majestic Distillery. False memory, question mark. If she remembered that later on, then how accurate are those recovered memories, question mark. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. But here's the thing. Even if it did happen, I mean, think about traumatic situations, like if there's a body, etc. A person might not remember exactly where it was, or they might remember other people that weren't really there based on the trauma, but that doesn't mean that a certain aspect was false. In this case, if that really was her dead body, maybe it was, and she can't remember other things. Or maybe it wasn't. But if it was, other parts not matching up based on just the severe trauma of the situation, I mean, that's not that suspect to me. I mean, it could still be true even if there's inconsistencies. I mean, think about your own, think about something non-traumatic. I mean, can you remember things absolutely perfectly that happened last week to you that are kind of mundane? Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that. Sometimes it's so traumatic you can't forget and it's more vivid, but sometimes it's not. The brain is a weird, weird thing. I think everybody can agree on that. And not consistent from person to person. Cathy was killed and dumped within 72 hours. If Cathy had been moved after 72 hours, you would have known about it because it would have come up in the autopsy report. Not necessarily. The medical examiner believes that Cathy was raped. The envelope was given to detectives in Baltimore by Cathy's father. There was never any mention of what was in the letter because it probably had nothing to do with her crime case. Maybe that is how the police knew she was in love with Keough. But it was Cathy's father who gave the envelope to police. The aunt of the director who encouraged him to do the show did not go to Keough High School and went to IND, the Institute of Notre Dame. Her two other sisters went to Keough where they became friends with Jean. One of the sisters did date Jean's brother. Susan, the woman in the show who went by Margaret, is Edgar's ex-wife and pretty much knew most of the Keough girls back then. Susan knew Jean because her sister-in-law is Jean's best friend, Maria, from high school. Wonder why Jean kept so quiet about it in the show and in the book, question mark. Maskell buried tons of papers in the cemetery because that year in Maryland there was a no-fire law instituted. In Maryland, you were allowed twice a year to burn papers, but because it was a very dry year, Maryland asked everyone to bury their papers. He didn't hide it. He had Mr. Story dig a big hole in the cemetery and bury the boxes in that big hole. You really think if he had any incriminating evidence to crucify him, he would allow Story to bury it? Maskell also hired a man with a truck to deliver the boxes to the cemetery. Don't believe the BS that it was a friend of Maskell's delivering it. It wasn't. Well, how would they know who was or wasn't a friend? I mean, obviously, this is a very biased debunking. However, there are still some legitimate points made here. And again, even if those papers weren't incriminating, who's to say he didn't have other papers that he got rid of in other ways? I mean, again, this doesn't prove anything. Mr. Story was fired because the man was an alcoholic and didn't always do his job. It was sad it was done a day before Christmas, but that explains why Story wanted to get back at Maskell. And again, there could be multiple, let's not fall for false dichotomies. There could have even been people who had it out for Maskell who wanted to, let's say, make up these stories about him, didn't know, like not thinking they were true, but if they actually were true, what does that mean? The papers boxes were buried in 1990. Jean and Teresa's Story didn't hit the papers till 94. Story saw nothing wrong. He even said it to the newspaper. Deep Throat, who is known to us as Frank, never saw any naked pictures of Keough students, and there were never any police reports made against Maskell. There were never over 100 girls making reports. There were no reports. But again, if this is a conspiracy, clearly they would have just gotten rid of the reports. I mean, it's weird. Like, this is such a classic coincidence theorist debunking, because if there's currently no reports and they were all buried, obviously that doesn't disprove any conspiracy, because if there's a conspiracy and cover-up, obviously they would have made those reports go away. Ill Departure responded with this: postulates don't ask for a reprieve. They are offered and encouraged to live as a layperson before they take their final vows. How do I know? Because I am a Catholic, educated in Catholic schools and universities, 16 years total. As far as a priest could never come close to committing a murder, look up the murder of Danny Croteau by Father Richard Levine in Springfield, Massachusetts. The church had a playbook for this. Also, if you don't think clergy are nonviolent, think again. My classmates and I witnessed classmates having their heads smashed against the wall, being locked in closets, etc. Comfortable Invite responded to Frankie, who posted that long rebuttal, so-called debunking. I've seen multiple posts of yours in the sub where you seem to come to Maskell's defense at every turn. I can understand that if you presented facts, but with all the things you quote-unquote disprove in your comments, you never provide any evidence or any reputable sources. You just counter a lot of stories citing what someone else said in a podcast, yet you never even provide a title or episode number of the podcast. You also fail to mention that some of Gene's inconsistencies, some key pieces of evidence, such as the evidence of maggots in Cathy's trachea, corroborate Gene's story. You also say you don't believe that Maskell buried those documents when even the attorney corroborated that those folders belonged to Maskell. Frankie responded, where did I claim he didn't bury the documents? I don't believe we know what the documents were, but I also do not believe I claimed he did not bury any documents. Well, yeah, there's a difference between not knowing what the documents were. I mean, it is a good point. If they were that incriminating, perhaps he would not have buried them like that, but who knows. I am not a Maskell defender. I do not believe he had anything to do with Cathy's murder, though. The problem is the official story from the Keepers has quite a bit of misinformation. I know several of the researchers who were on the original team assembled by the people involved with the program. These researchers have since left the team because they were uncovering evidence that did not fit the official narrative put forth by the show and were facing backlash. Since then, they have uncovered additional evidence and documents that further contradict the show's narrative. To be clear, no one is stating Catholic abuse did not occur. No one wants to impugn the victims. There is no corroborating evidence that Cathy knew anything about the abuse, though. There is evidence she did not know about abuse. Because of the situation of me being given evidence from this group of researchers, I am sometimes careful about how I phrase things, as I am not the one who has uncovered the evidence, and frankly, it has been years since I went down this rabbit hole, so I am no longer familiar with the original show's details. I often simply pass on what info is given to me. Okay, so clearly Frankie doesn't know if the info is true. They're just taking the word of these other researchers who may or may not be compromised. Again, I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. I mean, any of these situations could be true or partially true. Before I forget, there's a poster here, Zombie Cattle, on Reddit, who posted in the crime scene subreddit. I actually went to the high school she taught at. She taught there when it was Archbishop Keough, and it became Seton Keough in the 80s. SK was in the same building as Archbishop Keough, so for those who have seen The Keepers, I walked past the office where all the horrible abuse happened for 4 years without knowing what had happened behind those doors. We all knew about Sister Cathy, but we didn't know the extent of her murder until after this documentary came out. It was absolutely sickening. So that's curious. I mean, they really kept everything on the down low then, huh? Okay, so here's a comprehensive write-up on the Unresolved Murders subreddit, the murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik, sexual abuse / sex trafficking in the Catholic Church. Catherine Anne Cathy Cesnik was born November 17th, 1942 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the city's East End. Growing up as the eldest of 4 children, Catherine set a strong example for her younger siblings. In 1960, Catherine graduated from St. Augustine High School, a private Catholic school, as valedictorian and president of her senior class and student council. She then went on to dedicate her life to the Catholic Church as Sister Cathy Cesnik, an education and drama teacher. Sister Cesnik became employed at Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, Maryland in '69, and shortly after left her position to take another teaching job. While teaching at Western High School on November 7th, '69, Sister Cesnik disappeared while shopping for a present to celebrate her sister's engagement. Almost 3 months later, her body was found on the edge of a wooded training area for the U.S. Army. That's an interesting detail. She died from being struck in her left temple by a blunt force object. Shortly before her death, she planned on meeting with the Archbishop of Baltimore to discuss sexual abuse allegations against 2 employees of the school, the chaplain Joseph Maskell and director of religious studies Neil Magnus. So she was no longer teaching at that school, but was still supposedly planning to attend this meeting. Over the next 50 years, dozens of former students of Keough High School have come forward claiming that Father Magnus and Father Maskell not only sexually abused them, but also trafficked them to police officers and other authoritative members of society. So here's the thing. If there were 100 police reports and high-ranking police officers were involved in this, How easy would it be that long ago when there's only paper copies to make them disappear? I mean, it's not rocket science. Again, doesn't mean it's true, but if it's true, clearly they could have made those police reports disappear. Wouldn't be the first time. The students claimed that Father Maskell would bring them to a gynecologist for checkups and he would sexually abuse them once Father Maskell left the room. One student in particular, Jean Wenner, came forward in 94 claiming that on either November 8th or November 9th, 69, Father Maskell drove her to a wooded area near Fort Meade and showed her sister Cesnik's body. She vividly recalls brushing maggots off her face and saying, help me, to which Father Maskell responded, you see what happens when you say bad things about people. Despite the frigid temperatures in the months following her death, pathologist Werner Spitz confirmed that there were maggots inside of Sister Cesnik's mouth and trachea. This info was unknown to the public at the time. Tracking back to the week that Jean Wenner claims she was shown Cesnik's body, it was confirmed that temperatures were high enough that week for maggots to hatch. Okay, here's another situation here. So, if this was near Fort Meade, is this also involving military? Because a lot of coincidence theorist goofs, they also think none of this could ever happen in the military, despite, individuals like Aquino, who's openly a Satanist, going on talk shows while being a high-ranking member of the Air Force. I mean, it's insane the level of goofery and mental gymnastics authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists resort to in trying to dismiss any possibility that there's some kind of institutional cover-ups or conspiracies involving illicit activities in the military. I mean, the church is kind of accepted at this point, but in the military or other institutions. Timeline, November 7, 69, Sister Cathy Cesnik left her jointly owned apartment with Sister Helen Russell Phillips around 7:30 p.m. in search of a gift for her sister's engagement. The apartment was located at Carriage House Apartments. She then cashed her check of $255 at the closest First National Bank at 705 Frederick Road in Cottonsville and purchased fresh buns at Mooley's Bakery in Edmondson Village, then proceeded to search for a gift for her sister. November 8, 69, Sister Russell Phillips called Reverend Peter McKeough and Reverend Gerard J. Koob to tell them that Catherine had not come home. The three then reported Sister Cesnik missing. 4 a.m., Reverend McKeough located Sister Cesnik's abandoned vehicle. The car was unlocked and fresh buns that she had bought were sitting in the passenger seat. When her vehicle was processed at a crime lab, leaves and twigs were scattered in the car. Branches were caught on the antenna radio, and a twig hooked with yellow thread was found on the turn signal lever. Sister Cesnik was wearing a blue suit, aqua coat, and yellow sweater on the night of her disappearance. 8:30 p.m., eyewitness accounts placed her vehicle parking in her designated spot. At 10:30 p.m., several calls were made to police to report a vehicle illegally parked in the 4500 block of Carriage Court. See, I don't know. This is all kind of weird because if you were staging something, would you want that vehicle to be found that soon and reported? I mean, I don't know. Would you dump the spot somewhere else? Something seems kind of off about this timeline here because she vehicle. So an eyewitness account at 8:30. So that eyewitness did not see her specifically. Just the vehicle being parked in the designated spot. And then 2 hours later, it's not. November 11th, 69, Joyce Malecki went missing after a shopping trip at Fort Meade, the same area Jean Wenner claimed Father Maskell showed her Sister Cesnik's body in November. November 12th, 69, Joyce's abandoned vehicle was located by her brother. It was unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition, and the groceries she had just bought were still inside the vehicle. So, similar MO here. November 13th, 69, Joyce Malecki's body was found floating in the Little Patuxent River on the western edge of Soldiers Park. Her hands were restrained behind her back with a cord, and she was stabbed and choked. Her body was riddled with bruises and scratches, suggesting there was a struggle. Over the following months, police interviewed and questioned numerous leads, but there was still no sign of Sister Cesnik. January 3rd, 1970, Sister Cathy Cesnik's body was found by two hunters in Lansdowne, Baltimore County. Her body was hidden behind a snow hill near a stream. She was only 100 yards from the 2100 block of Monumental Avenue. Her autopsy revealed that she suffered a cerebral hemorrhage after being struck in her left temple with a blunt force object. Yeah, the vehicle, though, I mean, what is up with the vehicle being illegally parked? Did something happen and she tried to escape in the vehicle and she couldn't, and then that's when somebody grabbed her? I mean, the whole situation with the vehicle and the timeline does not make any sense. 92, Father Maskell, now the pastor of Holy Cross Church, was removed from his position by the Archdiocese after he investigated numerous allegations of sexual abuse perpetrated by Maskell. Spring of 94, Jean Wenner comes forward with her testimony of the day Father Maskell showed her Sister Catherine's body. Why did she come forward at that specific time? That's another curiosity. February 28th, 2017, Father Maskell's body was exhumed to compare his DNA with crime scene evidence. The tests were not able to connect Father Maskell as the killer, but he has not been ruled out as a suspect. May 2017, an anonymous woman came forward claiming that she was abused by a now deceased police officer that was associated with Father Maskell and Father Magnus. May 4th, 2017, police announced that they're exploring possible connections to 3 other bodies that were found in the Baltimore area. Joyce Malecki, Pamela Lynn Conyers, 16, found in 1970, and Grace Elizabeth Monte, 16, found in 1971. Okay, so I will probably have to do a dedicated episode on these other murders, but what is curious, so with Conyers, which this case was allegedly solved recently, I won't go too far into that. Supposedly there was a genetic match, and supposedly local law enforcement are now saying that there's no connection to the Cesnik case or any of these other cases. But how would they know? Because even if this guy that they got really did kill Conyers, I mean, a lot of these scumbags know each other, and there are certain coincidences here that are just hard to dismiss. So Conyers went to Glen Burnie High School, which is obviously in very close proximity to where Cesnik's bodies was found. It's basically the area between Cesnik and Malecki's bodies, or where they were officially found. And I mean, is it too much of a coincidence that Wenner said that Cesnik's body was where Malecki's body ends up being found? And a lot of the goofs that hallucinate that there's definitely no connection between Malecki and Cesnik, how many of them know that Malecki worked right across the street from Keough High School? That's a curiosity. And so, and her home was very close by as well. So this is all happening in the same general area. And then Cesnik's body is officially recovered in the area not too far from Malecki's home. What does that mean? Now let's stack the coincidence stack even higher, because Conyers, who goes to Glen Burnie High School, the day she went missing, so she went to a bonfire and a pep rally at Glen Burnie High School October 16th, 1970. October 16th, 1970. So after the rally, she drives the family car to Harundale Mall in Glen Burnie. And she doesn't come back from the mall. Parents report her missing. Body found October 20th in a wooded area. What is now Route 100, Waterford Road, Route 648 overpass. So what is also curious is that Malecki disappeared from Harundale Mall. So again, is this just too many curiosities and intersections? Because Baltimore is a bustling city with just so many different malls, so much different activity, so many different high schools, yet all of this is going down within 3 principal areas. The area around Keough High School, Malecki's home, Malecki's workplace, Cesnik's apartment, Cesnik's body being ultimately recovered, and the Fort Meade area where Cesnik's body is allegedly, as claimed by Wenner, 2, 3, 4 days, whatever, prior to recovery. And Malecki's body turns up there. Malecki also goes missing from the same mall as Conyers. And Conyers' body shows up not far from the mall. So what does everybody make of this coincidence stack? Now, we do have to, how much are the weeks apart? So obviously Baltimore is one of the most, it's a murder capital. Let's not sugarcoat it. Especially in the 70s. The crime rate's skyrocketing recently as well. They're getting hundreds of murders a year. I believe in 1970 it was 200 something. 1970 was it 200 something? Or 1969 it was 200 something. And in 70 it was 300 or over 300. So 69, 70, 71, 2 to 300 plus murders. But I can't see the demographics on the ages. So how many high school girls were being murdered? Because obviously people were being shot and killed of all demographics, mostly men. But how many were in this age bracket? Just high school age girls and young, very young women in their 20s. How many? So, yeah, this is a real problem to write this all off as coincidence. Malecki goes missing from the same mall as Conyers. Malecki's body turns up where Wenner claimed Cesnik's body was. Malecki works right across the street from Keough and lives right pretty close by to where Cesnik's body is found. Now we have yet another coincidence with Montaigne. So with Montaigne, Grace Elizabeth Gay Montaigne, also 16 years old. So she was last seen at Franklin High School after meeting with a stranger at Ricerston Shopping Center, found dead September 29th, 1971 in Westport, in an area used for dumping behind the Mount Auburn Cemetery off Annapolis Road. So now we're stretching the timeline for Montaigne. Now, Montaigne, this might be less of a possibility simply because she was a student at Franklin High School, which is another couple miles to the northwest. So it's actually outside of even what you can see on the map here. It's northwest a bit. Couple miles. And Ricerston's Town Mall is also off the map to the northwest. However, her body was recovered not far from Cesnik's body, behind Mount Auburn Cemetery, also close to Malecki's home. So what does this mean? So the body recovery site is also 1971. So September 71. Cesnik's body is recovered January 70. So it's over a year later. Almost 2 years. So what does that mean? So is that just a coincidence with all the murders going on? Maybe, because there's not this overlap. They're not going missing from the exact same mall, and there's not claims that the bodies were in the same spot where the people from the same mall were going missing. So Montaigne, maybe there's no connection here. But even the most devout coincidence theorists might possibly bat an eye to this problem here that not one, but two of these young women are going missing from the same mall, Harrendale, and just the proximity. We have three main locations here that just keep overlapping. It's how are we going to write that off completely? That's just so difficult. But I might have to do a dedicated podcast on all of their cases and possible relations here, but let's move on for now. Magnus Maskell's lives after Cesnik's death. After Father Magnus left his position as Director of Religious Studies for Keough High School in the late 70s, he went on to become the principal of Townsend Catholic High School for 6 years before his death in 1988. After his death, a former student, Teresa Lancaster, came forward with allegations that she went to Father Magnus for counseling after Father Maskell began sexually abusing her, and he said, quote, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Try to stay away from him," end quote, then closed the door on her face. Wow. I mean, that is so unconscionable. That is insane that he just refused to help. But what's weird is he did offer the advice to try to stay away from. Why add that? Is that just to make himself look like? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of weird, too. According to Jean Wenner, both Father Magnus and Father Maskell began to abuse her simultaneously while claiming they were trying to help her spiritually. Because of her innocence at the time of the abuse, she believed that they were praying for her and truly trying to help her. You know what else is kind of weird? Like, a lot of these horror movies and thrillers, they kind of paint some of these abusers as these evil, incarnate, intimidating people. These seem just like lowly, cowardly scumbags. I mean, it's just... Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some intimidating predators out there. But a lot of times, these are just cowardly scumbags that, you know, obviously need a good beatdown, but... Or many would argue much worse, but... A third woman came forward claiming that Father Magnus and Father Maskell raped her at a Catholic youth picnic her freshman year at Keough High School. She believes that they possibly drugged her drink. What does everybody think of all these allegations? I mean, if they're all staying anonymous and not benefiting from it in any way, it kind of seems like what would be the benefit of lying at that point? Like, you could argue certain people that like the limelight, they're not anonymous, they want to write a book and make money, even though you could still argue they're entitled to that, to the money as a result of the crimes committed against them. So you can't dismiss them either, but it seems like if there's no motive, financial, otherwise, because even if there is the financial motive, it doesn't mean they're lying, doesn't mean they weren't wronged. I mean, they were clearly entitled to whatever after that. But, yeah, I mean, when they're staying anonymous and there's nothing to gain, it kind of seems weird for them to just randomly make that up. The murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik remains unsolved. Discussion questions. How did Sister Cesnik and Joyce Malecki both go missing from a highly populated shopping strip with no sign of struggle? Did they know or trust their killer or killers? 2. In each disappearance, the women's vehicles were driven to locations a distance away from where they disappeared. Does this mean that there were multiple killers involved, that they were able to kill the women, dump the vehicle somewhere, then use a personal vehicle to drive away? That would actually point to why they weren't, a greater likelihood that they weren't caught. 3. How did Sister Cesnik's car get all the twigs inside and wrapped around her radio antenna? Doesn't this show that the vehicle was driven into a densely wooded area? Police theorize that she was either forced to walk in the woods or driven or carried. Did the killer kill Sister Cesnik elsewhere, then drive her vehicle to the wooded area, dump her body, then drop her vehicle off where it was illegally parked? Like, why would they take the risk of driving it back to near her apartment and illegally parking? I mean, it seems kind of weird. I don't know. Of course, there's plenty of discussion here. Many people think it's obvious that it's Maskell. I'm not so sure myself. Here's an interesting comment from Conspire in Theory. I do not think it was Maskell who did any killing. It seems like he was just a horrific rapist. I have a feeling there are a few missing names that probably were more cold-blooded. I mean, that seems to be the case, because if there's all these police officers and other people involved, possibly even military involved, would Maskell do the act himself, or somebody else did it, dump the body? Maskell, in his depravity, possibly showed the body, if that memory is true. Nikki posted, I truly do believe they knew and trusted whoever their killer was. I also believe that Maskell had, if not everything, a part to do with this case. There are too many allegations against him. It still baffles me how he was never charged with anything. Well, again, that's kind of the MO for the Catholic Church covering up abuse. I mean, there's plenty of priests out there that were never charged with anything that obviously have a long overdue meeting with a few baseball bats, or worse. Nemo777 posted this on the Keeper's Origins subreddit. We should back up to when Anthony Joe Maskell was a teenager attending St. Mary's Seminary in Roland Park on Roland Avenue. He and his friend, fellow pedophile William Sims, were both teenage camp counselors at then St. Martin's Camp in Love Point, Maryland in Kent County, a summer camp for children from the St. Martin's Parish on Fulton Ave in Baltimore. I will not use his name, but the St. Mary's Seminary counselor at the time told me years later that he counseled Maskell and indicated that Maskell had problems. Yet Maskell and Sims were allowed to become ordained years later, and they both further inflicted harm on numerous children under the protection of the Arch of Balto. Maskell, used his main talent, cognitive range, superior range IQ, and manipulation to get what he wanted. At the above-noted camp in 1957, William Sims was playing strip poker with the children. I was age 11, a young innocent child, as I walked by the cabin, and I heard the laughter from peers while Sims played strip poker with the children. Outside the cabin was Maskell, leering me into the open area shower where he assaulted me. Following the abuse, I asked someone who that man was, and he answered, a student priest. Years later, I learned that student was Maskell. I mention all this to show the hypocrisy of the Arch of Baltimore for teaching theology to the masses and yet allowing these monsters to exhibit their evil deeds on numerous children over the decades. Clearly, since Maskell was capable of assaulting a young child, what hesitation would he display if faced with the fear that his lie world would be exposed? Would he hesitate to kill a young defenseless woman who threatened to expose him for what he really was? I think not. Did he kill her? Of course he did. He had the motive and the friendship of many cops who fell for his manipulation and lies. I suspect that hole in her head was the barrel of his closest, only true friend, his gun. So that's an interesting post there. It's actually copy-pasted from Web Sleuths. So this person is alleging that Maskell assaulted them at camp. And so if he's friends with cops, is it possible the cops weren't necessarily in on it, but they just trusted him so absolutely? Being an alleged man of God, I mean, obviously not, but alleged, purporting, like pretending to be, would they not doubt anything he said? And if he did have one or two cops that he did involve in these operations of exploitation, would they back him up on this and fool all the other help fool all the other cops? On an article here on WMAR2news.com, a few more interesting details here. This is a few of the journalists and reporters worked on the keepers. I've talked to the hunter that found Cathy, and he said that since the day he found her, the police have never talked to him, except for that day. I mean, that's kind of weird. Does anybody else find that kind of weird? That's just another weird curiosity. Another curiosity is the same school, so the Keough High School, it actually closed July 2017 after confirmation that the Archdiocese of Baltimore actually paid out settlements to students who had been sexually assaulted by Maskell. That's kind of curious. All right, so let's get to Brother Bob. This is actually one of the most mind-shocking aspects of the case, just because it seems like the mystery of who exactly he is still unknown. So Screen Rant actually had an article here on things left out of the keepers. The identity of Brother Bob. The mysterious Brother Bob is in many ways even more chilling a figure than Joseph Maskell. Jane Doe, Jean Wenner, is quoted as recalling a man she knew only as Brother Bob, who she can hardly remember from being traumatized so badly by him, whispering to her that he was the one who killed Sister Cathy. So if that's true, obviously Maskell would have known about it if he drove her to see the body. Many have speculated the identity of this mysterious Brother Bob, with most pointing to Edgar Davidson as being the most obvious answer. Okay, so who is Edgar Davidson? Pop Sugar has a write-up on the keepers and several different theories by Brenton Parker, June 13, 2017. Let's look at this write-up on Edgar Davidson here. Edgar Davidson was accused of the murder of Cathy Cesnik by his first wife, who spoke with the keeper's interviewers under the condition of anonymity at a niece's behest. After Edgar, who had abused the wife and displayed erratic behavior in the past, arrived home covered in blood on the night of Cathy's disappearance, she immediately suspected him. At Christmas that year, Ed gave the wife a wedding bell necklace inlaid with a stone that was not her birthstone, which his family now believes was the engagement present that sister Cathy was out buying for her sister on the night of her disappearance. Cathy's sister has since stated that the birthstone in the necklace fits her now husband's birth month. What? It seems that Edgar actively encouraged his wife's suspicions, chuckling and making odd comments while the news broadcast about Cathy's disappearance played on TV. Davidson also drove a car with both feet, which lines up with the fact that there was mud found only on the left pedal in Cathy's car, which was found abandoned after her abduction and is presumed to have been driven by somebody involved in the crime. Davidson also called into a radio show after the murder to say that he knew where Cathy's rosary was. Not to mention the man's criminal record, which includes car theft and cruising around middle schools attempting to lure girls into his car. Because Edgar is still alive, the Keeper's filmmakers caught up with him to ask a few questions about his potential involvement. Though he corroborated several aspects of the crime on camera, Edgar maintains that he did not kill Cathy Cesnik. Whether the now elderly man still has his faculties about him is also in question. Many Reddit and Facebook viewers expressed discomfort while watching his interviews due to the fact that Edgar seems not all there. And I believe he has since died. But since The Keepers aired. So what are the options here? We're going to get a little bit more in depth in a second. But immediately this kind of jumps out to me. If he does have some kind of mental condition and he's not all there, and he wants to screw with his wife, would he pretend to have been responsible when he wasn't? Just to make his wife uncomfortable. And she might think it's legitimate, so she's technically not lying. Or again, disgruntled ex-wife, however legitimate other grievances may be, for example, domestic violence situations or otherwise, that doesn't necessarily mean that the abusive ex-husband was responsible for a murder. Now, if he is mental or he's a criminal, whatever, some of these whack jobs have really bizarre senses of humor, so they very well could have legitimately pretended to have been responsible if they weren't. Is that what happened here? I don't know, but again, this is MINDSHOCK. We don't fall for false dichotomies, like either he definitely didn't say it or he did say it, and somehow that proves he's definitely innocent or he's definitely guilty. Obviously, there are a lot more possibilities here, particularly when dealing with people with either bizarre senses of humor or who actually do have some kind of mental condition. Also, obviously, it's possible maybe he was involved, maybe even in whatever, getting rid of the body or moving the body, but not the initial murder. So there's a lot of different possibilities and variables here. Inverse.com has more information as well. Let's look at Davidson. The biggest suspect for Brother Bob proposed thus far by the Keepers is Edgar Davidson, the only suspect still alive at the time of the filming of the Keepers. In episode 5, the suspects, the filmmakers interviewed Debbie Yon, Davidson's niece, who tells the story of her mother saying, while drunk one night, some interesting things about Davidson. She, quote, she starts talking about my uncle, and she went on and on about a trunk and bloody clothes and had this whole story about her brother, Yon says. I waited until the next day and I brought it up to her in the kitchen, and she looked at me and panicked and said, I never said that. I didn't hear anything about it for years. And again, in this drunken state, so she's talking about, so this is Davidson's niece talking about her mother. So while her mother was drunk, she said these things. So going on about a trunk and bloody clothes, is that what she witnessed herself? And if that's unrelated to this particular crime, but her criminal husband at the time, whatever, if he was a criminal involved in other things, maybe he killed somebody else, or maybe he was just involved in whatever other crime, robbery, whatever, and then he led her to believe that it was Cesnik's murder that he was involved with. Or obviously maybe he really was involved, but there's a lot of different options here. Years later, Davidson's first wife, only called Margaret in the documentary, got a hold of Jan on Facebook and revealed her version of the story. Apparently, Davidson's sister didn't want Margaret to marry Davidson from the beginning, saying that there were things about Davidson that Margaret didn't know. Eventually, Margaret claims Davidson attacked her, saying, quote, "Do you realize I could kill you right now and tell myself someone else did this and believe it," end quote. Wow. That is quite an insane comment right there. So obviously a lot of people threaten. How many people have threatened to kill somebody either in jest or not in jest, and obviously have never ever killed anybody? A lot. Millions, maybe tens, maybe hundreds, maybe even a billion people in the world have done that. That's kind of a common thing to say for some people when they're mad. I'm going to kill you, whatever. Or in a heated argument. Or maybe they do intend to do it and they just don't, whatever. Drunk people say things as well. But he's not only saying that he could kill, basically part of this threat is that he's going to tell himself someone else did it and believe it. So the threat is not only that he's going to kill her, but that he's going to convince himself that someone else did it. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but does that display some kind of mental issue here? It seems that it does, particularly combined with everything else. Later, Davidson came home one day with his shirt filled with blood, white shirt filled with blood. Upon being asked about what happened, he said he got into a fight with his boss. But Margaret remembers that it came out on the news that Sunday that Sister Cesnik had disappeared. Margaret says she remembers the date of Cesnik's disappearance, November 7th, was the night Davidson came home with a bloody shirt. So I looked at him and his reaction was rocking back in the chair and getting a smirk and kind of laughing. He said, quote, "By the time they find her body, it's going to be wintertime. She's going to be buried under the snow," end quote. So here's the thing about that. Again, if he really just was involved in a fight, this guy's a criminal. He's got a rap sheet. What are the chances that he doesn't ever get into any fight ever and never has any blood on his clothes? There's a lot of people who aren't responsible for murders who have blood on their clothes. There's a lot of people, especially if they get drunk, they get into fights, or even not drunk. Criminal-minded individuals, they get into fights. Maybe there's burglaries, maybe they fight amongst themselves, the people they steal from, whatever the case may be. So if he's also mental, did he take that opportunity, the fact that it was on the night that a high-profile or semi-high-profile, relatively high-profile for the area disappearance, he led his wife on because he wanted to mess with her? That's certainly not, scumbags have done far worse to mess with their significant other. So did he just take that opportunity to smile and make these jokes, particularly if he has a mental condition? Even if he doesn't have a mental condition, there are certain people that might do that even without having some kind of mental condition. But if he does, it's kind of weird. Especially if he's this criminal scumbag, would you really put it past him to make jokes about that and pretend he was involved in something he wasn't, just to make his significant other uncomfortable because that's his goal, because he's some kind of scumbag? Or, of course, if he was, again, obviously this is individual based, because some individuals might completely just outright deny, which is also suspicious in a way, but who knows. After Margaret and Davidson separated, he was arrested for stealing a car and loitering outside the local middle school trying to pick up middle school girls. The doc makers actually got the chance to interview Davidson, but he seemed too senile to be a reliable source, becoming easily confused and taking long pauses. What results is a disheartening, suspicious conversation, but nothing that's damning without a police investigation. Again, that really doesn't tell you anything, because if he does have a mental condition, even if he wasn't involved, obviously it would look suspicious. And then obviously if he was, it would also look suspicious regardless. As the Keepers explains, Davidson is further connected to Cesnik through a necklace that Davidson gave Margaret for Christmas one year, a silver wedding bell with a green stone. That necklace is suspected to be the same necklace Cesnik was out buying for her sister and future brother-in-law as an engagement gift on the night of her disappearance. The wedding bell would have signified their engagement, while the green stone would have symbolized the brother-in-law's birthstone, a peridot for Cesnik's sister to wear. Upon being interviewed, Davidson confirmed as much as he could that he didn't know why he would have given a green birthstone to Margaret, as hers was red. He said he never saw Cathy that night, but many fans online are taking his pregnant pauses, accompanied with sad facial expressions, as proof that on some level he knows something. And again, he might know something through other individuals and not have been directly responsible either. A lot of different possibilities here. The other piece of evidence connected Davidson to the disappearance and murder of Cesnik is that investigators suspected that the person who drove Cesnik's car back to her apartment after she disappeared drove with 2 feet due to mud being on the brake pedal but not on the gas pedal. The filmmakers questioned Davidson about whether or not he drives with 2 feet, a decidedly unconventional way to drive. What that got to do with anything, Davidson asked. Upon further prompting, Davidson admits with a nod that yes, back in the day when he could drive, he drove with 2 feet. I had nothing to do with her disappearance, her murder, or anything, Davidson added. Well, that's kind of weird, though. Can anyone else corroborate that he did in fact drive with 2 feet, or did he just say that just to say that, or did he misunderstand the question? I mean, again, if he's mentally not all there, like, what does that mean exactly? Let's also go over Billy Schmidt here, the neighbor. Well, there's actually a group of suspects here, also from this Inverse article. The next group of suspects, made up of Billy Schmidt, Ronnie Schmidt, and a man named Skippy. Barbara Schmidt, Ronnie's ex-wife, described Billy as a kind, gentle soul, but strange. He had very weird ways. Barbara was friends with Billy, her brother-in-law, and said that due to his family's aversion to Billy being gay, Billy went out and got an apartment that just so happened to be right across the hall from Cesnik. It just so happened to be. Barbara says she finds it an odd coincidence that Cesnik's body was found by the Schmidt family home and by the family business halfway between the two in the woods. Okay, so it's not right next to within yards, but it's within, 100 to 200 yards between the two. That's a curiosity. It just so happens that Cathy's body ultimately found right in between the Schmidt home and business. Now, see, that by itself is not coincidental. But the fact that he also had an apartment that just so happened to be right next to Cathy's, and then the body is found nearby the family home and the family business. And just to add to this monumental coincidence stack, of course, is also that Malecki just so happened to work right next to Keough High, and where her body was found in the same area where Wenner claimed that she saw Cesnik's body before it was officially discovered by whomever, law enforcement and otherwise, near Malecki's home and also halfway between the Schmidt family home and residence. It just so happened. And of course, add that to the coincidence stack of all the other girls missing and found, like Conyers, who went missing from the same mall that Malecki went missing from, Herondale. I mean, the coincidence stack here really is high. There seems to be a ring of connected individuals here. I mean, it's just hard to write all this off because for the goofs that hallucinate, it's definitely not any of these people, and it was just some kind of roaming serial killer or stranger abduction murder. Like, Baltimore, it's not like this is the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's so many places back then and today, whatever. It's why would the bodies just so happen to be found where they were found with connection to all of these other places? I mean, that seems like a statistical impossibility. I don't like to say impossible. I mean, improbable, no doubt. But is this like winning the lottery like several different times? Because someone can win one, but even winning once, I mean, that's unlikely. But when you win several different times, I mean, that's just weird. That's weird, like statistical anomalies. I mean, obviously coincidence theorists, I mean, that's what they do. They pretend and hallucinate everything is coincidence. But people with brains and critical thinking abilities, I mean, you don't just write that off. Like, for this is a lot of coincidences for it to have just simply been a random serial killer or stranger abduction that had nothing to do with any of these people. But going back to the Schmidts here, one night, Barbara says her then-husband Ronnie came home covered in blood. He told her not to worry about it and that he was in a bar fight and that he wasn't harmed at all. So wait, so we have... How many different people do we have coming home covered in blood the night Cesnik disappeared? if it was that night. I mean, that's awfully coincidental. Now, here's the thing. If these guys came home with blood and bloody shirts relatively often, like once a week, once a month, whatever, consistently over the course of a year, then okay. Then we can write, like, we need some controls here. Let's do some scientific analysis. Because if they routinely come home with bloody shirts and blood all over them, then it might not be that strange that they also happen to have come home on the night Cesnik disappeared with bloody clothes and all this blood. But if that's the only time, or let's say if that only happened 2 or 3 times per decade, and that was one of the only times, or literally the only time, I mean, even the most devout coincidence theorists might have to raise an eyebrow there. Maybe, if they have some kind of brain function. Most don't. But anyway, continuing on here. So he comes home covered in blood. He told her not to worry about it and that he was in a bar fight and that he wasn't harmed at all. Quote, he had just had blood on his hands, his forearms, and his shirt, Barbara says. So I knew he'd been into something, but it wasn't a fight, end quote. Supposedly, after the nun died, Ronnie changed. He started drinking, doing drugs, acting crazy, Barbara says. It changed our lives, just like with Bill. Bill became a hermit. He did not go to work anymore, stayed in the house, didn't drive his car, so this is the neighbor, and didn't see any family or friends, started talking about the woman in the attic. Billy would apparently talk about Cesnik's death all the time. So here's what jumps out at me. Is it possible Billy was either forced to assist with some kind of cleanup or car dumping? So if Ronnie or Davidson or whoever these other priests that were primarily involved or ordered it or whatever the case may be, because they seem pretty cowardly, so if these priests were going to order, like if Maskell or any of these other individuals, would they actually kill somebody themselves? I mean, maybe. I mean, obviously, those that abuse children are the lowest of low in terms of scum and filth, but they're also cowardly. So would they actually do it themselves? I mean, I don't know. Does it seem more plausible that they would outsource to other scumbags? And if these are the scum that they outsourced to, if Billy was kind of made to go along with it, that seems more likely they would be obsessed with it, talking about it, etc., etc. Whereas if he was a primary player contracted to do this, why would he bring attention to himself by talking about it? So either these people are just mental and had nothing to do with it, or they were kind of possibly involved after the fact, or have some kind of knowledge, because why else would they want to draw attention to themselves like this? I mean, these are just my initial thoughts. Again, this is MINDSHOCK. I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. The motto here, of course, is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. Anybody who isn't there is simply hallucinating if they are claiming and pretending that they know anything is or isn't for sure. And then there was Skippy, who Barbara thinks was Billy's lover. Apparently one night Barbara was followed by a man in a car dressed in a nun costume who tried to follow her home. To this day, I believe it was Skippy, Barbara says. That guy, Skippy. Maybe he thought I knew something. Maybe he thought I knew too much. Eventually, Billy moved home because he was so distraught. He'd pace, take pills, drink, and babble about the woman in the attic. One day, Barbara went up there to prove that there was nothing in the attic. She was wrong. She found a mannequin dressed in a nun's habit and dress. Quote, he'd say she was after him, that she was chasing him, Barbara says. She would talk to him. The whole thing was bizarre. Once the murder happened, he became a very tortured soul. I think he couldn't live with his conscience anymore, end quote. Months after Cesnik's death, Billy tried to commit suicide 5 times before doing so on the 6th, taking 49 pills and chasing it with alcohol, sleeping pills. Also implicating Ronnie, Billy, and Skippy are Ronnie's children, Sharon and Brian Schmidt. Sharon tells the filmmakers that her father once said to her mother, quote, you want to know why I drink? Because I killed a woman. We put her behind the shop, end quote. But it's Brian that has the story that sounds damning. Quote, I was in Cesnik's apartment and my Uncle Billy was there, Brian told interviewers at one point. Billy apparently made Brian leave and go back to his own apartment. When I went looking for my uncle, he rushed me back to the apartment and shut her door. What I can tell you is my Uncle Bill called a guy named Skippy, black hair and mustache. He came, they both went over to her apartment. They came back with what looked like something rolled up, a rug or blanket. They said, quote, "We've got to load this in the car, we'll be right back." Then my Uncle Bill and Skippy went and picked up my Uncle Bobby, assumed to be Ronnie. And my Uncle Bobby took me and a 22 over there behind my grandma's place behind the big house back there in the woods. And while Bobby was shooting the gun in the woods to keep me occupied, I'm watching the two of them load this out of the trunk. As I grew up, I realized my Uncle Bill did it. Skippy covered it up, and Uncle Bobby kept me occupied. My Uncle Bill said if I told anybody, he would beat me to death and he would hurt me real bad. So not only beat him to death, but also hurt him bad. And I was not to ever tell anybody about anything or I would be killed. But despite anecdotal evidence, none of this is enough to implicate the men. But as the Keepers points out, the investigation is still ongoing. Okay. I mean, this is quite a lot of people associated with Davidson, with the Schmidt family, that are making these claims. I mean, these aren't random people on the internet. I mean, these are actual family members. I mean, that's curious. So what's going on here? So again, with the coincidence stack, are these groups of people related? If they're not, let's examine the theory that they're not. So is it possible, let's say Billy Schmidt, gay, bisexual, whatever, or who knows, just possibly neither and mental. And is it possible he accidentally harmed Cathy in some way, and then he calls one or two people to help him get rid of the body? No, and the priests at the school are also trying to intimidate her to keep her mouth shut. Is it possible? Let's not fall for false dichotomies. I mean, this is the real world. There's a lot of different scumbags out there. There's a lot of human filth out there. So is it possible that there are two groups of people, one of them killed her, maybe, and the priests never would have killed her? Is it possible maybe they even knew the Schmidts or Davidson and these other people, but they didn't actually contract out her killing? Was it a happy accident in the deranged minds of the priests that somehow she was killed another way? And that possibly could be enough to rectify Maskell showing Jean the body. But even if he wasn't responsible for the deaths, he took advantage of this knowledge to try to intimidate and threaten others. Is that possible? That still doesn't quite... We still have the question of Malecki, Conyers, possibly Montaigne. But... yeah, Malecki really throws a wrench in this theory, because why would there be other deaths? So, again, I'm not saying that it's not... See, if they're this level of psycho, is it possible... Okay, let's go through all the bases here. Again, this is MINDSHOCK. If Maskell and the circle of priests and this ring of scum that are abusing these kids at the school, if they're not responsible for Cesnik's death, but they think they'll be blamed, or not necessarily the priests, because obviously, like, these insane narcissists, if they think they can get away with anything, maybe they wouldn't be nervous. But perhaps people associated with them are nervous. And without their direct knowledge, they do kill Malecki to cover this all up. Now, Malecki, what we didn't discuss is Malecki just so happens to look practically identical to Wenner. I mean... the coincidence stack here, I mean, they look so similar. I mean, I don't know exactly about the hairstyle, but look at the facial features. I mean, they could be sisters or at least cousins. I mean, they look so similar. Just the facial structure, the eyebrows, the nose, the mouth. I mean, again, it is also hard because these pictures are kind of old, especially of Malecki. But, yeah, I mean, is it possible they wanted to kill Wenner to silence her, and they killed Malecki instead? So again, it is very possible that Maskell is such cowardly scum that he would never actually kill anybody himself. So he could possibly either give the order, or if this ring is that big with cops and all these other people who think they can get away with this stuff, is it possibly they're acting outside of Maskell's orders? and they took it upon themselves. And who knows what if they're abusing these kids at the high school, is it possible they're doing it also outside of Maskell's knowledge? Because if Maskell introduces them and they're doing these acts at the high school or other areas, is it possible they're also doing it separate from Maskell and his ring, even though they're technically part of the ring? And in one of these other instances, maybe there was a threat that people are going public, and if they're not, if it's who knows? But if they thought, because it does seem that Maskell would have this somewhat of a sense of security that the church would cover everything up for him, so he might not be as worried. Whereas, who knows, some of these other individuals might be worried if they haven't, or if they were newly entered into the ring, and then there's these threats of people going public. So did they take it upon themselves? And obviously after the fact, Maskell and all these other scumbags, they would know about it after the fact, but they didn't order it. Maybe they didn't, and they didn't want it done. And if there's a mistake, so let's say if they thought they would be implicated for Cesnik, either Brother Bob or any of these other individuals who committed these acts, if they thought they would be blamed for Cesnik, if it was a weird neighbor, or like the Schmitz, whatever, and let's say there was even an accident, maybe some thwarted advances, whatever, or who knows what it was, some kind of accident, or maybe one of them snapped. If they have severe mental issues, maybe they snapped and there was a violent incident, Cesnik is killed. They get rid of the body. Now, and this Maskell, and not Maskell himself, but in this ring, there's individuals who think they're going to be blamed for it. So do they kill Malecki to make it look like something else is going on? Now, the coincidence stack of where the bodies were found, where Malecki just happens to work across the street from Keough High, didn't Malecki see something? We haven't actually discussed this. Does Malecki have a link to any of the people, any of the abused or their families? We didn't explore that. Is there a link we don't know about? Because before she had a chance to say anything, she was knocked off. Or, of course, there's the possibility somebody mistook her for Wenner. Because if Maskell took Wenner to see Cesnik's body months before it was officially discovered, did she say something to someone else about it? Somebody found out about it. So then they killed her because of that incident, either with or without Maskell's knowledge. And maybe it's more likely it's without Maskell's direct not necessarily knowledge, but without his direct order. So is it possible to rectify these two groups of people if they're not involved? Now, that does seem to be less likely just based on pure statistics, although not impossible. Does it seem, based on available information, obviously as more variables are put forth, we can adjust these analyses, that maybe not even Maskell, maybe part of the ring who are nervous and worried about this, they outsourced it to the Schmitz. Not necessarily Billy, but the others, and possibly Davidson. I mean, yeah, this is really a tough case. I could see why it was requested on MINDSHOCK, because there's so many layers here and coincidences. It's just really hard to rectify all of this. So here is yet another bombshell here that was on the Out of Darkness podcast featuring Gemma from the Keepers. So this was posted on the official Keepers subreddit. Actually, I don't know if it's official. On the Keepers subreddit. One piece of info that has come out, this was posted by McNevite. One piece of info that has come out during one of the interviews is that a survivor now alleges that she was sexually abused in a car driven by Edgar Davidson and James Scannell, sitting in the car to, assumedly, while he was on the job as a police officer. If you don't remember, Scannell is the old retired cop that Gemma talks to, who was involved in the original investigation of Cathy Cesnik's murder, and who was also tight with Father Maskell, and he was also either one of, if not the first person to discover Cesnik's body. This info is really interesting for several reasons. First of all, because it creates a link between Davidson and Father Maskell, since Maskell was pretty much an honorary member of Baltimore law enforcement, and Scannell himself was tight with him. Secondly, I think it settles my own questions as to whether James Scannell is just a complete ignoramus when he asserts Maskell has been falsely accused of abuse, or whether the man was in on the whole charade and lying through his teeth. Honestly, when I first watched The Keepers, I naively believed it was the former, so when I heard the survivor's story, my jaw hit the floor. I was completely duped by this harmless old man image. No wonder the investigation of Cathy Cesnik's murder went nowhere if one of the cops investigating it was a participant in the very abuse which Cathy was trying to stop. Some posts here. I never trusted Scannell. I didn't like the way he non-answered Gemma's questions, but I didn't pick up on the in-on-it vibe in my first couple of watch-throughs either. I thought the insinuation Gemma was making when she said she wasn't sure about him was that he was fame whoring, for lack of a more forthright term, by making more of him knowing it was Cathy. I said, hello, Cathy Cesnik, then was actually there. Response by McNevite, right? I mean, it's just hard to believe that the person you're looking at could have been involved in the sexual abuse of children. It's just so expletive up. But really, who just sits there in a car watching a grown man molest and rape a 14-year-old girl? I think that a man who is capable of that is also capable of much worse. And again, that's if the story is true, that he was in the car. Sandy Beach 05 responded, I never trusted what he said. Guarded body language and eye contact. Answers were not detailed and short. He lied about the maggots. He didn't want to talk. He did not give anything freely and appeared very suspicious. For someone who was a cop, it appeared he didn't seem very concerned or interested that the case was never solved. I mean, there is quite a lot of stories now, circulated accusations with this ring of individuals, because again, it's really difficult to make heads or tails here. And again, we're in the post-Epstein era, because a lot of these clueless coincidence theorists, authority-worshipping cultists, they would probably be, even the most devout of these bootlicking goofs, they would probably be less likely to even entertain these ideas. But now, I mean, unless they're completely brain-dead, in the post-Epstein, Jill Zane Maxwell era, when even the likes of Alex Jones have been vindicated by all of their claims about these elite scum who prey upon, well, not just children, adults too, but yeah, particularly children. I mean, it's kind of hard to just completely write off all of these allegations. Also, to the people that are still clinging on to the theory that it was a random transient or serial killer just passing through, there's a letter to the editor from one of the journalists who worked on the case. Robert A. Erlandson, letter in the Baltimore City paper, January 12, 2005. I believe our investigation actually turned up a prime suspect, a convicted rapist from the area where the murder and dumping occurred. Whoever dumped Sister Catherine's body on a snowy piece of isolated waste ground, now completely overgrown, in Lansdowne, had to know the area well. The spot was not easily accessible to a casual passerby. So that's curious. So, and also, if we believe Wenner's account, the body was not there the whole time. It was near Fort Meade, in the same area where Malecki's body was recovered, in the same general area. What does that mean? Again, some people don't believe Wenner's account. So if the body was there the whole time, either way, apparently only a person who knew that area very well could have gotten to that spot. According to this journalist, anyhow. Detectives traveled to the Seattle area to interview the man, but without any solid evidence, they were unable to elicit a confession. So they had a prime suspect who moved to Seattle. So who, again, the name is not here. The late Reverend A. Joseph Maskell, chaplain and guidance counselor at Seton Cow, may have known more about the murder than we discovered. However, I do not believe he killed the nun, despite the former Seton Cow student's allegations that he took her to view the corpse and wanted her to remain silent or else. It doesn't state here whether he believes the allegations or not. But whether he believes them or not, whether it happened or not, of course, that doesn't mean that Maskell personally committed the act. Mr. Nowrowski, however, continues to believe that Maskell either committed the murder himself or hired a hitman after learning that the student had complained to Sister Catherine about his sexual abuse. Although Circuit Court Judge Joseph H. Kaplan dismissed 2 recovered memory lawsuits against Maskell, we found several Seton Cal alumni who did not rely on recovered memories. One in particular, a nurse, told us particularly striking and credible story. She remembered everything clearly about Maskell's abuse of her, and she told people, including her brother, about it at the time. She and others were precluded from filing lawsuits by the statute of limitations. So if that's true, and if they also told all these people at the time, back then, not after this documentary is being made, and by the way, this letter's from 2005, way before The Keepers. I mean, that's kind of telling if that's all true. I mean, that lends a lot of credibility. Mr. Nugent also refers to the role of the Archdiocese of Baltimore in the investigation and denials that the church interfered. We had statements from several police officers that the church pressured city police heavily when Father Gerard Keough and other Cesnik intimates were being questioned about her disappearance. When the initial allegations arose about Father Maskell sexually abusing Seton Keough students, the Archdiocese claimed it could not find any other former students to support them. However, with the help of 2 Baltimore County lawyers, we easily located more than a dozen such women. Their credibility eventually forced Cardinal William H. Keeler to revoke Maskell's priestly faculties. You know what's weird, though? So they're clearly blatantly lying about not finding any students to support these allegations. We also looked at the murder near Fort Meade of Joyce Malecki, but like the police, we found nothing to link the 2 crimes. Both murders were brutal crimes that cry out for solution, but after 35 years, resolution appears to remain beyond investigators' grasp. Even if, as Tom Nugent reports, county police and the FBI reopened the Cesnik investigation, this is truly a cold case. As the late Major Lewis Bud Romer told Mr. Nugent, every homicide cop has one case that haunts him to the end of his career, and his is the Cesnik murder. This is also true of reporters. The Cesnik case is our ghost as well. So, yeah, this is curious. They're saying nothing links this, but Malecki's home was in the area where Cesnik's body was officially recovered. Malecki's body discovered where Werner alleges Maskell took her to see it in Fort Meade. And Malecki works right across the street from Keough High School, and Malecki happens to look almost identical to Jean Wenner. I mean, that's a lot of links. Now, that doesn't mean it's related, but that's, I mean, to just write that off, that's kind of crazy. Here's an interesting post by Real Frank DeLama. I think, and this is wholly unscientific, based on observation here and in the Facebook group, most folks believe Maskell ordered someone else in or associated with the ring, for want of a better word, to silence Cathy. Most seem to believe she was grabbed on her return to the apartment complex that night. A smaller percentage believe she was either grabbed at the shopping center or at some other time location. Of that group, it seems to me that there are 3 different groups. 1, that person or persons were the Schmitts. 2, that person or persons included Edgar Davidson. 3, it was someone else so far unidentified. Finally, of this majority view in this umbrella theory of Maskell order to hit, at least some believe Keough, McKeon, and or Russell had some additional information that they did not share with the police. I think very few people think that either the Schmitts, Davidson, or Keough killed her on their own. But those folks are out there. Maybe they can explain their reasoning more fully. I'd like to hear the argument for each of them. And as I proposed earlier, I guess we can call this the McGuire theory. Again, I am not alleging it's true in any way. It is simply a theory that I have come up with to try to fit the variables. I'm not even saying that this theory is more likely than the theory that Maskell ordered someone to do it. I am stating that the theory that might possibly fit the variables is that someone in Maskell's ring, without his initial knowledge, possibly panicked and killed Cesnik without his order. Obviously, he found out about it later. He might have not even wanted it to be done, again, especially with his narcissistic nature, and if he truly believed he'd be defended by the church, unless, actually, we haven't talked about this. If there was some kind of an incident with the archdiocese or somebody, if there was something, because we don't know the relationships with any of these scum, but if the people at the top were kind of saying, Maskell, we've covered for you for too long, if something else happens or if there's another kind of, some kind of hoopla being brought up about what he's doing at the high school, they're not going to protect him anymore. See, if he had a conversation with somebody from the top, one of these church officials at the top, and they made it clear to him that they would no longer be protecting him, that could be motive for this scumbag. That could be motive. So, under that condition, maybe he did order it or even did it himself. But if that didn't happen, and especially way back then, I mean, is there any reason to believe that? There's really no evidence that that happened. But so let's not, if we're not going with that theory, which again, there's nothing really supporting it, it maybe seems more likely that just one of these psychotics that are in the ring panicked because they didn't have this assurance of protection or this level of narcissism that Maskell might have had. In which case they killed her without the order from Maskell. And all of this fallout is simply that. Or, again, if the Schmitz, if for whatever reason, killed her without direct association. So the McGuire theory is basically somebody from the ring did it not from the order of Maskell. And then all of this fallout just came afterwards. Actually, just looking at everything, it does seem less likely that the Schmitz had some kind of situation that was not related to the ring. Because if somebody from the ring hired, let's say, Ronnie Schmidt and Davidson and some of these other guys, and Billy, it seems more likely, given just everything that happened and how openly Billy supposedly talked about all of this, that he was either there or coerced in some way to go along with it, even if he didn't want to. That kind of really, that probably hits all the variables the most. Because it is kind of strange that Billy Schmidt just so happens to live right across from Cathy, and the family home and workplace just so happens to be where the body is ultimately recovered. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's pretty tough. But some are now speculating that Father Robert Flaherty is Brother Bob. A lack of info about his life at the time has made deeper research difficult. However, viewers now know that Robert Flaherty was accused in a separate sex abuse scandal as well. It's possible Flaherty and Maskell had some deeper connection at the time that has simply been overlooked. MIC.com has an interesting write-up here. Who is Brother Bob and the Keepers? What we know about Sister Cathy's rumored killer. By Ali Hirschlag. Already being called a darker, more harrowing documentary than Making a Murder, Netflix's The Keepers features some truly disturbing villains. One in particular is Brother Bob. Gene Wenner, one of the students who was allegedly raped by a number of priests at the Archbishop Keough High School, declared Cathy Cesnik's murderer to be the mysterious Brother Bob. According to Wenner, Brother Bob abused her as well, along with Father Maskell and Father Magnus, but she has no recollection of his face. She believes Brother Bob could have easily been a pseudonym to keep his identity secret from the women he raped. To this day, I'm more terrified of Brother Bob than I have ever been of Joseph Maskell because I don't know who this Brother Bob is. Wenner says in the documentary, according to Bustle, I don't remember the man's face and I have no idea if he's still out there. She does, however, remember Brother Bob telling her that although he didn't want to, he killed Cesnik. He apparently told Wenner that Cesnik threatened to report the abuse being conducted by the priests, so he killed her. At the start of the documentary series, Wenner didn't remember much about Bob, likely because the abuse she experienced resulted in a lot of repressed memories. Over time, however, certain details have started to come to her. Brother Bob was one of several unidentified men who Father Maskell allegedly brought in to rape Wenner. She recalled him being more uncontrollable than the others and had to be reined in by Maskell on a number of occasions. Maskell may have also used Brother Bob's frightening behavior to scare Wenner into staying quiet about Cesnik's mysterious death in '69. After Cesnik was killed, Maskell took Wenner to see the body. You see what happens when you say bad things about people, he asked her. Wenner, along with many other women who were abused, have found little absolution with regard to holding their priest abusers accountable. It's understandably difficult to find solid evidence in a case that's so cold using accounts that are nothing more than spotty memories. If this investigative series uncovers enough info to bring more of the wrongdoers to justice, it may rock the Archdiocese as much as when the Boston Globe uncovered 34 years of priest abuse. Yeah, unfortunately, clearly this is nothing new in any way. On the Keepers subreddit, there's some discussion here regarding Brother Bob by Gyro Emily Feta. Smart thinking from Mark Carpenter from the Keepers Facebook page, posting it here just in case he's not on Reddit. Father Robert Lentz, now deceased, is a strong candidate for Brother Bob. Jean should have a look at his photos to see if it jogs her memory. If anyone has an old church service video from St. Mark's, Jean may be able to recognize his voice. He worked at Cardinal Gibbons, whose priests are referred to as brother. He went by Bob. He knew and was in close proximity to Maskell. He also went on police ride-alongs. He was accused of abuses. He fits the profile of Brother Bob nicely. Margaret posted this, the abuse. So this is actually quoted from a Baltimore Sun, December 4th, 2004 story. Perhaps someone will remember Father Robert Lentz, since deceased, but he was suspended in 2002 after multiple men came forward with molestation accusations from the mid to late 60s. The abuse allegedly took place while Lentz was a priest at St. Mark in Catonsville, making him one of 6 priests from that parish who have been accused of child sexual abuse. 6 priests from the same parish accused of sexual abuse, ? What the expletive is going on? If so many people are getting hurt, why hasn't the Catholic Church been proactive in saying there is a problem in the way our church functions and we need to establish a new system, maybe one that doesn't involve a hierarchy that allows any one person with too much power to hold over others? In fact, they cannot change because they are a business and people have bought into an idea, then they should come with a warning. Join at your own risk, history of sexual abuse, and be held accountable by the government. They should be made to call themselves Catholic Inc. because any organization that allows these abuses to happen again and again should not be allowed to call themselves a church. The extent of the abuse is shocking, and this is only in Baltimore. What is the number of priests the world over that have been accused and or committed sexual abuse against children? So, Glad Call actually discovered a few transcripts here. The history of St. Clement's that discusses Linden and Maskell. Found an interesting link that has the history of the parish of St. Clement, talks about Maskell being the head of the Boy Scouts and providing counseling long after Charles France said his mom told them Maskell was abusing him. This transcript mentions that at the time a Father Robert Linden was his colleague, one of 4 priests who helped run the parish essentially. Says he went off to Peru, which I just read as he was sent away because he wasn't keeping his victims quiet. At this point, how can anyone argue the entire religion isn't born out of some weird justification for a pedophilia cult? And I grew up pretty Roman Catholic. We went to church on Sunday, CCD, trips to Rome with my grandma to visit the Vatican and see the Pope. He misspelled Pope by spelling pipe. Then you realize it's all lies and these people murdered and did whatever it took to protect their life of free reign to abuse. Vatican Girl is another good example, but they're countless. It's a sad realization. Magoo posted, I think it's very plausible that Brother Bob's name was not Bob at all, just an alias. I have also wondered if he could have been Maskell's cop brother. Some people claim Brother Bob never existed, but Meryl PTS has a great post here. She was regarding Jean. She was terrified of him. It's really not a surprise she doesn't remember his face. The amount of fear around this man is clear proof he existed. Have you noticed how she described all her abuses with a straight voice, no emotions in it? But when she talks about that Brother Bob, she is still scared. She even associated Maskell as her protector from this man. That should tell you how much she's scared of him. She even said it. She doesn't remember it all. She's afraid to remember it. She even said that after Sister Cathy's death, that was when hell truly begun for her. Like before, what she went through was nothing. This man existed. I have no doubt about that. I say he didn't even use a pseudonym. Why would he? No one tried to hide any of their identities. Now there's this Lentz priest. It all makes sense. He was Brother Bob. It all adds up. Now, whether he was or he wasn't, supposedly Maskell took her for a session with Brother Bob right after showing her the body, or soon after. So that's pretty daunting. Tune in, tune out posted, I haven't really seen anyone address the other brothers. One was named Brother Bob, one was Brother Ed, and I can't remember the other one mentioned. They seemed obvious to me when watching the show, but I can't remember now any insight or theories for this. When I say obvious, I mean their names correlated, perhaps by coincidence, in an obvious way to other people mentioned in the investigation, though I do believe they are aliases. On the other hand, I also think Maskell was arrogant enough to not feel that aliases were necessary since he was silencing the girls through fear and abuse. I could see him flaunting real names of people since he clearly knew he was untouchable. Yeah, I mean, that's a curiosity. Yeah, you could go either way. Or perhaps Maskell didn't feel the need for aliases, but they were paranoid and that's why they wanted to use an alias. On the Keeper sub, also here's a post by Magnus Casaubon, Brother Bob and Skippy. Billy and Skippy attended a pride rally of sorts, donning priest and nun costumes, respectively. Billy could have worn the priest costume when he entered the Keough premises as Brother Bob. Skippy, on the other hand, could have given his identity away by stalking Barbara, who was able to vaguely identify him that day as a nun with a bushy mustache. Edgar was known to stalk girls in his car and has a bushy mustache as seen in the interview. Other notable Brother Bobs and Skippy: one, Robert Hawkins, close friend and confidant of Maskell, who defended him till the very end. Father Hawkins, who affectionately known as Father Bob at St. Rita's Roman Catholic Church in Dundalk, was known to have been under fire from the Archdiocese for protecting Maskell. They shot pistols together and ride-alongs with Baltimore police. It's difficult to find this man on the internet. Even the church's website, he seems to be suspiciously removed. 2. Father Gary Koob, the most enigmatic figure in this entire case. His actions and artifacts with him need to be looked into, most especially the typewritten letter that he alleged was sent to him by Cathy. If that letter is proved to be a fabrication, then we might have ourselves a passion-driven crime along with conspiring with a pedo ring. 3. Lieutenant Thomas Maskell, Father Joseph Maskell's older brother, who retired from the police early in 1966. Very little is known about him, but Tommy is conveniently positioned to be Brother Bob or both Bob and Skippy. Makokomo posted, hypotheses: Brother Bob was a cop. Unless that was really his name, an officer might be more concerned about anonymity than the staff at Keough, who felt irreproachable at the school. Also, Maskell, who considered himself the smart guy in the room, deferred to Bob in handling the silencing of Jean. He would do that with a cop who was practiced in coercion intimidation, but probably not another clergy member. Interesting. And of course, if he was a cop, he could definitely make reports disappear. Brando McGregor posted, Pride parades didn't exist until 1970. That was the anniversary of the Stonewall riots in 1969. He was dressed as a nun just to mess around. The plot's about to thicken here. Ruby posted some interesting information here. So Maskell's brother was a police lieutenant who was shot twice in the line of duty. Another officer, Sergeant Jack Lee Cooper, was shot through the heart and killed while looking for the person who shot Lieutenant Maskell. That was in December 1964. Just because a movie tries to accuse someone does not make it true. Why are these movie makers not looking for Mr. Teeth or any of the other people Doe accused in her deposition? Ask yourself why they forged photos of the car across the street so that Sharon What's-Her-Face could say the photo in the paper shows Uncle Billy's apartment. Well, you know what? That photo was never in the paper. It was produced by the Keeper production team and has been admitted to 5 months ago on their Facebook page. Okay. Other posters are also saying the police actually tried to discredit Jean by saying there would be no maggots. So they were the ones who downplayed it and said it wasn't true simply because they assumed there would be no maggots, either knowingly or unknowingly, without doing a proper investigation or double-checking the temperatures. Some other curiosities mentioned here by Rough Balance. If you take into consideration that Maskell was a trained psychologist and he chose the girls he abused based on past sexual abuse, you can tell he tailored each of their abuses based on what he knew from their past, his hypnosis of some of them, etc. Jean, remember, was one of many children, daughter of a policeman. It seemed as though some of her peers were subjected to rape by policemen, but not Jean. You would think that Maskell kept her away from policemen as to not tip them off they knew whose child they were abusing. Remember her hearing Maskell tell Brother Bob something to the effect of, "Be careful with her. she's part of a litter, there are more, when he was aggressive and sadistic in his rape of her. I feel like he knew not to have policemen involved in these acts as to not tip anyone off who was not part of his close circle of people in power, but who were also on the force. Yeah, I mean, that's really getting into some extreme detail there, but that could possibly make sense. Now, if it was his own brother cop who was no longer a cop, is that, I mean, would that make it more likely that it could have been him? INGWR posted this on the Keeper subreddit. Both Skippy and Brother Bob show up in the series as these anonymous, strange, aggressive characters. Brother Bob demonstrates his anger in Maskell's office when he admits to the student that he killed Cathy. In episode 5, Skippy is supposedly the cross-dressing guy that dresses as a nun and chases the wife of Bill. Skippy was also referenced as a guy that Bill helped to bury Cathy before Bill got depressed and eventually killed himself. So we can put two and two together and know that Bob and Skippy are the same person, a bisexual cross-dressing affiliate of both Father Maskell and Bill. Here's another post. Am I the only one who thinks Brother Bob is Maskell's actual brother? It seems that on at least one occasion he was coaxed into raping Jane Doe, which would make sense, as once he committed the act, Father Maskell could use the blackmail to have him do everything in his power to keep it hush-hush. Some responses, this makes a lot of sense. Lieutenant Joseph Haskell was shot twice in a Christmas Eve robbery in '64. One shot went through his neck, the other went through his back and pierced his lung. If the bullet went all the way through, that may be responsible for the scar that Jane Doe described. Other posters think that Cathy was hit in the skull with a police baton. That's what killed her. Another post here. Brother Bob was the police brother of Maskell. I don't remember if Jane Doe remembered what Maskell's brother looked like or if it was one of the other women. But I definitely remember that being confirmed that he was frequently in there too. The power dynamic seems weird with Brother Bob and Maskell. Different than the other men he had going in there. Brother Bob seems to possibly be more dominant in that relationship. Frequently needed to be reined in and not listening to Maskell. Is that because the older brother cop would never listen to his younger brother priest or whatever? Other posters say, totally agree, the police brother made the evidence and records disappear. Victoria posted, I thought this too, the way that Father Maskell stood by the door only when Brother Bob was raping Jean, as if he didn't really care if the other abusers got caught, but he was going to make sure nobody walked in on his family, whether that was out of loyalty or out of self-preservation to protect the identity of anyone who could be directly linked to him. Here's an interesting theory from Ruchina on the Keeper subreddit. Does anyone else notice that Gemma Schmidt's brother in the taped interview mentioned that his Uncle Bob was there as well as his Uncle Bill? And Jane Doe on numerous occasions talks about a Brother Bob that she cannot put a face to? Could they be the same person? Also, anyone else think that Ed is Skippy? It would not have been unusual at the time to keep your sexuality separate and hidden, having a wife but also having a male lover. My theory is Skippy/Ed was hired by Maskell to give Cathy a scare. He hit her too hard, though, and killed her. The priests were probably there at this time, too, being menacing but not wanting to get their hands dirty. When Skippy realized what he had done, he went over to get Billy to help. Billy then rang his brother as he panicked and needed a hand with the body. As for Coop, I think he is innocent but hiding things, and there are definitely things I don't believe in his story. I think him and Cathy were sexual and she had a pregnancy scare, hence why she writes about her getting her period in the letter. As she was a nun and he at the time a priest, he could not divulge this. I don't believe they threw her vagina at him, but I also think he loved her and didn't kill her. I've just finished watching and I'm still digesting to see if this feels a bit out there or scattered. Now, for people, allegedly he said that the police threw her genitals at him to, I guess, I don't know why. Mad Skills posted, I totally believe police would lead him to think they threw her vagina at him. It was wrapped in paper. Plus, I think the reaction from the cops says it all. They were sort of wishy-washy and seemed like they didn't want to say, of course we wouldn't throw a murder victim's vagina at a suspect, but yeah, we probably would have pulled a stunt like that with a fake in order to shake a suspect. It seems like a weird thing to do either way, but... Current Moo posted, Skippy had a mustache, Ed didn't at the time. I don't trust Keough as much as I used to. In episode 2, he admits that he knows something, but is very unnoticeable. He says Cathy and I were supposed to meet the night before she was actually killed. The word suggests that she was kidnapped first, killed at a later date. Keough must have known where she was and when it happened. If he was there or not, I do not know, but this tells me that he knows something. I mean, is there anybody who isn't suspicious in this? I mean, or is it a case of people who just heard rumors and they're too scared to make official accusations? Blue Kanga posted, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that Billy Schmidt was involved. Regarding Keough, he's a predator in my opinion. Quite what his role was remains to be seen, as he'll never fully disclose. The police did right to focus upon him, as there are some huge red flags and stats would indicate he's the most likely suspect. However, the police, then as now, are not equipped sufficiently to investigate crimes by serial predators and trafficking rings, nor is the legal process and system fit for the purpose of trying such matters. That's a pretty good point. Now, here's the thing. If this really was some kind of intimidation tactic and they really didn't mean to kill her, that kind of does line up with Jean's statement as well. And possibly a lot of these guys being in the know, but not directly responsible. And, of course, all connected to the abuse going on at the school and churches and other areas with all these people. A post from Chesriazira. Does anyone else suspect Scannell, the officer who found Cathy's body? He was very close to the Maskells. And the survivors said cops would assault them too. I think he may be part of the rape ring, if not also part of the murder. As for Bill, everything his niece said seemed circumstantial to me. He's obsessed with Cathy's murder. Well, she was his neighbor. Obsessed with the Catholic Church, maybe it had to do with their stance on gay people. What she associated as guilt could also be easily explained as mental illness. It certainly wasn't easy being a gay man back then. Smashley says, I think the nun mannequin in the attic kind of confirmed it was more than just being gay. Cathy's death haunted him. Chessie responded, I still think it's circumstantial. He could have been mentally ill. He could have had a nun fetish. He could have been bisexual and was in love with Cathy. They never mentioned that Cathy was missing any of her habits. I would hope they would have searched her room. Blessed responded, another victim identified Scannell as one of the rapists. The Baltimore County Police are obviously protecting those on the force that are still alive and that were involved in the trafficking. And remember how much of the evidence disappeared. Actually, some are alleging that other girls were also brought to her body. Like how many? This is so weird, again, with the lack of verification here. Some posts here by Maki Fua. It's more likely Maskell informed one of his accomplices that the nun knew but wouldn't talk. Perhaps someone panicked after that, killed her, either intentionally or not, and they just sort of took it from there. I don't think Maskell would have directly ordered her death. Given his power, personable personality, and influence over the local community, I really don't think he feared being outed. I would say it's more likely that he told someone that Cathy was aware of abuse at Keough, possibly someone within his pedophile ring who likely panicked, as they themselves wouldn't have had the power and backing that Maskell had. It may have been that the murder itself was accidental, i.e. manslaughter. Perhaps the perpetrator sought to threaten her and intimidate her initially, but she stood up to him and things escalated. We're aware it was only one strike to the head, and that's all it really takes. Argonne Infiltrator responded, Maskell had no need to worry about getting caught. He was already caught once, and the Catholic pedophile protecting system protected him and enabled him to just keep going. They just moved him from one place to another. There was absolutely no reason for him to be afraid at all. He knew the church and the police would never hurt him. The church has warehouses full of money to spend on fighting the PR wars, paying off victims, and the church had the public, the police, and justice system rigged fully for their own protection. Getting caught at most would have been a short-term annoyance for Maskell, something he had already experienced at least once. The worst thing Maskell could do is kill Cathy, especially if Maskell essentially sent hitmen after Cathy, because it would bring attention to himself and the whole series of child abuses that were going on there. Not to mention the risks of something going wrong with rigging of the police investigation. What if the FBI, for example, becomes involved? The local scheming and backroom deals don't work the same way when there is a dead body and a group of investigators that are not hell-bent on working for the benefit of the church. The church is happy to protect child rapists because they know all the tricks, and if all that fails, they can just write a long enough number on a check backtrack and make the issue go away. But a murder case, that's a whole new level. Those cases won't go away with money. Although, unfortunately, it seems like throughout history some of them did. In the end, what I think happened was that Maskell simply wanted Cathy to be scared so that she would not talk. But what happened was that she would not back down, or something else happened, like Brother Bob losing control and ending up killing her. The head wound is pretty interesting. It has said to have been caused by big heavy object. Earlier in the show, it was shown that police used to carry that big wooden baton-style weapon, which fits perfectly with the wounds on Cathy. So one idea is that Brother Bob was a cop who used his baton to kill Cathy, and Ed, Skippy, and Billy were just moving the body. Again, how do the other murders in the area add up to this particular theory, or are there just that many murderous psychos in the group who Maskell can't control? Alright, here's the last theory we're going to go over, quite mind-shocking. Posted by Simon Says to Cry on the Keepers subreddit also. Here's Skippy and Brother Bob are the same person, an undercover cop keeping an eye on Cathy hired by the church. Here's my theory. I believe Skippy and Brother Bob are the same person, and it is a person in the police force. I think the church and the hierarchy of the school were more than happy to accept the request of Cathy and Russell to live outside of the convent, because that would improve the separation between her and what was going on in the school. But I believe when she moved there, they hired an out-of-city undercover police officer to befriend her neighbor, Billy Schmidt, to keep an eye on her comings and goings without looking suspicious. He noticed former students visiting her apartment, alerted Father Maskell, but they kept it confidential, and that's why Father Maskell would bring them specifically to his office and take out his anger on them. Now, the night before she was murdered, it was different. It wasn't just teenage girls going there. It was a boyfriend with a former student. Skippy saw a man getting involved in the situation and notified Father Maskell over the phone immediately. That's why they appeared that same night and interrupted their meeting. I do believe Cathy knew the person involved in the murder. It was her next-door neighbor. I think she arrived home getting ready to leave the car. Billy went over to say hello as she was getting out of the car. Billy could have asked her for a ride into town or for something small or a quick ride somewhere. She probably agreed, and he probably sat in the passenger side, placing the bakery dinner rolls on the floor by his feet. She got back in the car, and that's when Skippy enters the car on the passenger rear side with a knife or gun and orders her to drive. She might have started yelling. He started yelling back, orders her to drive. That's when the girls, a block or two away, heard the commotion and ran away. She drove to a destination, I'm not sure when or where, but it was a place to meet Father Maskell. Father Maskell used Skippy's police baton and hit the side of her head constantly with anger and hatred. The blunt force trauma to her head was so great it caused a large hole in her head. It was a crime of passion. The second destination was where they dumped her body. They removed her shirt, lifted her skirt to make it look like a sex-related crime. They drove back up the road toward the apartment from the dump site. Billy noticed Father Keough's car pull into the parking lot as they were heading there. Knowing he was a friend of Cathy's, panicked, told Skippy they couldn't enter the parking lot because they were her friends, and Skippy did a quick sharp turn into a driveway on the other side, shut off the engine, and told Billy to make a run for it, but not before grabbing the necklace. Not for profit like most criminals do, but as an undercover police officer, he thought it would lead to more information about her whereabouts before her disappearance. Shortly afterwards, Billy moved back home and was clearly affected by the murder and psychologically and emotionally deteriorated. Skippy had disappeared. Probably because his work for the church was done, there was no one to keep an eye on anymore at the Carriage House Apartments. What do you think? That's actually a pretty decent theory that checks a lot of boxes. I'm not sure, again, about Father Maskell doing the dirty work himself. A lot of times these cowardly scum wouldn't do that. So is it possible Skippy did it, or someone else? There's also, the eyewitness account of girls who heard commotion. Skippy disappeared after the death of Cathy. It wasn't until he followed Barbara in a nun outfit that he came up again. So what does everybody make of this? I mean, the rabbit holes run deep, and if this is actually connected to a much bigger problem in upper echelons of various institutions and organizations, not only in Baltimore, that could explain that. I mean, I'm going to do another follow-up episode here on the other murders in the area and some more information, actually, because there's definitely a lot here. This was a requested case, and obviously, in typical Mind Shock fashion, we have to do comprehensive deep dives. But that's it for now. All the Mind Shock listeners can leave their own thoughts and theories about what is going on in this perplexing, unsolved case, not definitively solved anyway, because it seems like it's very possible more than one individual may have been involved here. So, and yeah, and again, police corruption and or incompetence blocking justice here. As always, hope everybody found another edition of the Mind Shock podcast interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. You can become a YouTube member right here on YouTube or a Patreon. Like and share. Make sure to subscribe. Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.